Hi, I'm Joe Allen, and I'd just like to discuss a little bit with you the proper role of government in our lives. Um, as, as best as I understand from the conversations I've had and the books that I've read and the articles um, that I've had access to, the reason why we are obligated to follow laws and to pay our taxes and to file draft cards and to go to jury duty, etc., is because of a understanding and implicit understanding called the social contract. Now, the social contract is a contract we have with our government. This is a contract that is supposed to be voluntary between the government and ourselves that obligates us to do certain things for the government in return for the benefits that the government provides and the services that the government provides. Now, I have a few problems with this myself, and I'll just explain my thought processes here. I don't see how I am obligated to live up to the terms of a contract that I never agreed to. Now, maybe some people did agree to this social contract, and in that case, a stronger argument could be made that those people are obligated to live up to those terms. But if I have not agreed to this contract, it's just assumed that I have, unless I act in some way contradictory to that contract. Now, that puts that contract in a position that no other contract that we enter into has. And if I were to make an agreement to buy a car or something, I have to make an explicit agreement. There's not an implicit agreement. There's no assumption that I'm going to purchase the car unless I say otherwise. Okay, so that's the first problem I have with the social contract. The second problem I have is that every government on earth claims to derive its authority from the social contract, but there's no place on earth that is not under the jurisdiction of at least one, and in most cases, several governments. So if I opt out of this contract, there's no real way to do it without opting into another social contract or more than one social contract. So I'm basically stuck because you're not free if you have a choice of jails to go to. That's not freedom. Certainly it's better than having no choice in jails, but it's still not freedom. So that's the second problem I have with the social contract. The third problem I have with the social contract is that contracts are not valid when one of the parties or more have been coerced into agreeing to that contract. A few examples of this are when prisoners of war are forced to sign statements saying they were well treated and that they were not tortured. Another example would be if that I liked from the movie Godfather, where the movie mogul is forced to sign the Frank Sinatra character to a movie deal because someone chopped his horse's head off and put it in his bed. Right? That's an example of coercion. Another example from the same movie is when the Godfather made an offer that couldn't be refused, saying that either the signature was going on the contract or the other party's brains were going on the contract. Now, those are examples of coercion. Now, the coercion involved in the social contract is a little more subtle than that. They force us to go through government schools or government licensed schools for a minimum of 12 years, and that's not optional. There are truancy laws. And during that time, we are indoctrinated into the wonderful benefits of the government. We stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. We're uh, forced to be educated in the government's version of history and civics and law. I mean, to the degree that people are educated in public schools, which I think almost everybody would agree is inadequate. Um, because, well, from my perspective, it seems that the schools aren't really there to educate, they're there to indoctrinate. And the evidence I have for that point of view is that the schools do such a poor job educating. When I graduated from high school, there were very important things I didn't know that I had to learn later on my own, and I'm certain there's other things that are very important that I haven't learned yet that I will be forced to learn on my own because the government educational system didn't provide the information I needed. Um, so anyway, I'm digressing a little bit. To get back on subject, my concern is that these schools, their main purpose is to indoctrinate the students into being useful citizens, quote unquote, which means, in a sense, they're um, being trained to be good taxpayers, that they are being indoctrinated or educated or trained to be um, docile pets, wards of the state. They're being, um, okay, well, I've gone on enough about that. So, but that amounts to coercion because when people are below the age of consent, below the age in which they're legally allowed to make binding agreements, enter into legally binding contracts, they're being educated or indoctrinated by the state. Well, that's a type of coercion. So these government schools, they have us in their clutches for 12 years, and during that time, they're teaching us how valuable and important the government is, and why we should pay our taxes to be good citizens, and that good citizens pay their taxes, their quote unquote fair share. Um, well, that amounts to coercion. And of course, if that isn't sufficient to get people to fully cooperate with the government, they have more, well, let's say less subtle means at their disposal to get us to toe the line. These are things like guns that are ultimately pointed at us if we don't pay our taxes. Now you're saying, well, of course, they don't just come point a gun at you if you don't file your tax return. No, that's not it either. They will first send a letter, and another letter, and another letter, and maybe a phone call and a personal visit, and eventually they'll come and they'll take your stuff. And if they don't take your stuff, or if you resist taking their stuff, they will throw you in jail. And if you try to escape from jail, then they'll point the guns at you. But that still amounts to force. So the fiction that um, taxation is voluntary is one that's perpetuated in the schools and one that probably would not be allowed to stand if um, we weren't subject to the indoctrination of the government through the public schools. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.